Good morning from Vietnam, Jin. Thanks a lot for spending your evening joining our inside sharings and share your stories with our global audience. On behalf of the listeners, I want to say thank you.
Well, thanks for having me, Ha. It's good to be here, and I look forward to your questions.
Yeah. So, Jin, we really admire the work you do. You're the first person in this field that joined in our show out of the 494th person. So, I'm really curious to know what you are doing and the books that you read and that you author, the works that you offer to the market. So, let's start by a little introduction. In our culture, it's very honored if we can have you to introduce a little bit about yourself and the work that you do. Can you help us with that?
Absolutely, and I'm not surprised that I'm the first of type to be in your audience. I help companies achieve, and I do that by helping them communicate more effectively with appropriate agencies of government or Congress, depending on their need. I focus on defense and security companies, and in doing so, I draw on my varied background, where I was a former naval officer on active duty for 24 years. I've been a corporate lobbyist at the headquarters of a large defense company in Washington, D.C., where I oversaw legislative affairs.
Mm.
And then for the last 10 or so years, I have been helping companies by working as an independent consultant. So small, medium, and large companies, could be US companies, could be international companies, but they're trying to make something happen in Washington, D.C. As I said, it could be a policy, it could be funding. Sometimes policy inhibits funding, and they just need to be heard. It's a complex process that I've had exposure to from a number of perspectives over a number of years. So as a result, I'm now in a place where I can help companies recognize what they may be missing in their overall engagement plan as they try to sell to the federal government.
Mm. Wow. You have a phenomenal career. It's very unique also. And then you introduce it in less than a minute or so. So, Jean, let's examine that journey together, all right? So,
Sure.
let's travel time. When I was young, I always wanted to become an astronaut and wearing suit to jump in different planet, but life did not give me any opportunity to do what I wanted to do, right? So when you were young, what was your dream about your future, though?
Yeah, I had exposure to successful people in my life who, at the time, attributed their success to their time serving in the United States Navy.
Mm.
Specifically, my father. I had an uncle who served in World War II, and in high school, I raced sailboats with a guy who was a commercial airline pilot, but who had previously been a naval aviator. And the common theme that they each attributed their success to was that time in service. And so I knew as a young teenager that I wanted to join the Navy, at least for some period of time, to get that experience and then perhaps go off into business. As it turned out, I loved it in the Navy, and my wife was allowing enough that I served 24 years and commanded two ships and rose to the rank of captain. But ashore in the Navy, I learned a lot about Washington. So in the Navy, they say you're at sea or in DC, and you rotate back and forth. And so in my Washington time, I learned a lot about how the military services interact with Congress and how budgets are developed and how those interagency activities come together to help a government provide solutions for the nation, but also to see where industry fits into that. And so I had no idea when I entered the Navy what the post-Navy life would look like. I thought it would be some sort of business or consulting, but really did not have a clear vision of it at the time. Even when I left the Navy, 15 years ago now, you could not have told me I'd be doing what I'm doing the way I'm doing it. It just wasn't in focus for me.
So it's either at sea or in DC, right? So what, when you left the sea and go to DC, what happened during that transition though?
So it happens every few years. So you serve at sea for a few years, you deploy around the world, and then you come ashore for a specific assignment. And so my assignments tended to focus on congressional representation, representing the Navy to the Senate or the House or to the Appropriations Committee. That's the Defense Funding Committee. I was fortunate enough to spend 1 year sort of on loan from the Navy in the office of a senator who happened to be an influential senator. It's a cross-pollination type of program that happens among many agencies and Congress, and it's meant to be a learning experience. And I was, excuse me, I have a little cough.
Sorry.
I was able to learn quite a bit in those shore assignments about senior level communications. I traveled with members of Congress on their international travel. So the military services help senators and congressmen execute their international travel. And what that allowed for was relatively close engagement with some pretty recognizable names to learn about what's important to them. And it was just a great immersive learning experience each time I was in Washington, D.C.
And then why did you decided to leave the Navy though?
Well, it's an up or out system. You either promote up or it's time to leave. 24 years is a full career. That's earning retirement. The captain is a senior officer. The next step is to potentially be selected for admiral. That was certainly a possibility, but there are no guarantees. And I was in a position and just a place in life where it made sense to transition to an industry job in Washington. So at the time, I was the director of the Navy Senate Liaison Office, and it was a fairly low barrier to entry to transition over to industry from that position. And I knew that, and so I took advantage of that.
Well, normally in the Navy world, the military world, and normal world outside the business world, I thought it's very different. And so how did you get onto the business world after the Navy world? Was that difficult for you, or was it just normal?
A little of both. The jobs working with Congress are actually what are recognized as civilian clothes jobs. So you don't wear your uniform on Capitol Hill when you're performing those roles. And in part, that's just so that it doesn't look like there's a bunch of military people walking the halls of Congress. And so I was used to operating in a quasi-civilian role, but on active duty. However, when I went into business, there was a much steeper learning curve than I probably acknowledged. And it's very, very common. In fact, it's so common, I wrote a book about it called Make Your Move, in that I recognized after a few years that many people in those defense corporate jobs are not as fulfilled with their work as they were on active duty. It's a very common thing. And that's in part because nothing can replicate the satisfaction and fulfillment and the responsibility and accountability that's associated with military work. It just doesn't exist in business unless you're the top person at a company. And there's only so many of those, right? And you have to spend a lot of time to get there. So I recognized a few years into it that I really was not as satisfied and fulfilled as I had hoped in a defense business job. And an opportunity came along for me to leave that company and be an independent consultant. And I saw that there was a need for that sort of support for other companies. Just from my perspective in Washington, I knew there were hundreds of thousands of companies that don't understand Washington. They don't have a presence there. They don't see it up close. And so they need somebody to help interpret and guide them. And so I took advantage of that.
Wow. Jim, when you work for the corporate and your position was very high ranking in the corporate also, so it means that it comes with security, it comes with a lot of, good thing at the end of the month waiting for you. But you decided to leave the corporate again and then go and went on solo. That means that you leave everything behind and get into the uncertainty water, right? So why did you what strength did you give to yourself back then to be independent consultant?
Yeah, so I had a little help, as many do. I probably would have stayed at that company for another 10 years if that were possible. I was a senior vice president. I was overseeing legislative affairs. The company was acquired during my time of working there by an international company. What comes with that is a lot of reorganization and sort of continual churn. And eventually they wanted to restructure the Washington office such that there was no longer going to be a position for me. So that made the decision to leave there fairly straightforward. However, what I didn't choose to do, I knew I did not want to go to another company and do that again. And many people do that multiple times through their post-military career. I knew I didn't want to do that. I recognized I had something of a skill set with my understanding of the budget and policy and Congress and how those pieces fit together and how they affect companies who are selling to the government. And so I had my wife's concurrence to let's try it out for a year and see how it goes. And it went spectacularly, and I've never looked back. It's only grown in the 10 years I've been doing this.
Wow. So Jim, for that 10 years in business, can you tell our audience if they need how would they use you for their services though?
Companies come to me almost 100% by referral from somebody else. So if somebody recognizes the uniqueness of what I can provide in terms of an ability to analyze their situation quickly, recognize where they're misaligned with the corporate opportunity, help them recognize how they might develop a multi-year approach as opposed to a chasing a singular contract approach. That sort of referral builds on itself over time. You have to have a strong network. You have to have expertise that you can stand on, and then you have to be able to demonstrate results. I've been fortunate enough to be able to do that. I feel highly confident that I am unique in this area. There are some who specialize in Congress. There are some who specialize in each of the military services. There are a very few who can cross the Potomac River, so to speak, and work effectively on both sides of the river. I have invested substantially in myself to become a better consultant and to learn more about the industry. I recently completed a PhD dissertation in public policy where I focused on perspectives of defense executives about their understanding of Congress and use of Congress. I recognized that companies don't lobby in large enough numbers. And so the very large companies seem to do it and recognize it. Some smaller companies do it and recognize the benefits. But in the defense industry, less than 0.5% of companies are registered to lobby, which means they're missing huge opportunities. And so I've recognized that opportunity exists. I understand it like few others do, and I can speak to just all aspects of it.
Mm-hmm.
So I can help a company president much better understand their position, that of their competitors, and where they might be missing out on opportunities.
Wow. And Jin, you also author and co-author several books, and I know that you have a new book also coming along the way in 2023, right? So since when you start building the love for writing, though?
I'll be blunt, it's not a love for writing. It's a recognition that books matter as people evaluate someone's capability. I learned a few years into my consulting career that that is an accepted form of social proof of what I know and how I implement strategies and tactics to help companies. So I wrote my first book, Pitching the Big Top: How to Master the Three-Ring Circus of Federal Sales, and that's where I describe my view of the three rings of the circus: industry, agency, and Congress. And I use the term circus to describe the relative motion that is present among these three rings. There are things happening all the time in the federal process across multiple fiscal years. And so many people aren't high enough up in the big tent to recognize there's a lot happening that they can not only see, but that they have some control over. And so I tried to open people's eyes to what that was all about. That book was very successful. It brings a lot of people to me, and it very simply tells the story of how some of these pieces fit together. And then I tailor that to different companies' situations. Closely related to that is a program I created this past year called Capital Currency, which is intended for companies who aren't quite sure if they're ready for hiring full-time support like me. So I typically work in a retainer relationship where we're going to work together for a number of years on particular objectives. Some companies are not comfortable enough yet to recognize that they have the need and they want to learn more. Capital Currency is a method where people can self-teach some of the principles of what's in Pitching the Big Top: How to Master the Three-Ring Circus of Federal Sales. And so you can watch me on videos. You can watch me demonstrating how to conduct meetings on videos. I interact with other people. I'm interviewed by people. It's about 50 videos, long and short form. It's a downloadable workbook, some templates that drive people through questions that they must answer in order to properly engage with the federal government. There are case studies. There's access to me for a period of time. And then there's access to my online forum, which is a closed group of people, like-minded people who are trying to do better at federal sales. So those things are ways in which people can have access to my methods and intellectual property and sort of ease their way into determining whether they want a full-time relationship or not.
Jim, we've been in the business world also for quite a long time, but then doing federal sales is not a lot of people in my networks doing that also. So tell us the challenges people in your field will face it when selling to federal as well.
Yeah, the U.S. government buyer is not one person. It's never one decider. It's a group of people. It might be a committee. There are people who influence decisions. There are people who enable decisions. There are very few actual decision makers. So you're constantly trying to piece together coalitions and support in the form of moving people in a particular direction. And it's a big part of how the $1 Million Influence book came about. I've worked with Alan Weiss for a number of years, where he is a consultant and coach. He's written 60 books on consulting in one form or another. And I approached him about collaborating on combining our business and government sort of experiences into one place. But an overarching distinction of U.S. federal sales is the process orientation and the very slow pace of the maturing of the sale. So a commercial company that comes in to try to sell something to the federal government will immediately get quite frustrated because it just doesn't move as fast as things do in the commercial world. If you're an international company trying to sell to the U.S., you absolutely have to have somebody guiding your solution. Somebody has to be positioning you properly. Otherwise, you can have lots and lots of meetings, and they'll all be at the wrong place at the wrong time with the wrong person. And you have to have somebody positioning you to tell your story correctly and succinctly and at the right time and place. And so I put all of that together to help companies figure out an appropriate engagement plan where we can have reasonable assurance of what the timeline will be upon which we'll achieve success.
Wow. Thanks for sharing. So if you rewire your whole career, right, and if somebody wanted to do the job like what you are doing right now, and if they want to be success at what they do, what would be the skill set that they need to acquire now and master now so that they can do the job?
To be a lobbyist, or to be successful in anything?
To do the job that you are doing.
Yeah. The number one thing is you have to be able to communicate in verbally like this, and in a written form as well. It is that you have to have expertise, not experience. They're two different things. Experience, in my mind, means you've done something for many years. Expertise means you know how to do it exceptionally well. There's a difference. You can become a lobbyist just by saying, I want to be a lobbyist. How effective you'll be is another question. Some lobbyists come directly from staff jobs on Capitol Hill, where they learn that part of the process. What they don't necessarily learn in that part of the process is how the agencies of government really work. You almost have to have served within an agency to truly understand that agency. So I spent time in the Navy. That gave me exposure to the Department of Defense and to other service agencies. And I have recognized that the DoD organization, in terms of how they budget, is more mature than any other in government. And if you can operate in DoD, you can translate that into other agencies, generally speaking. Now, I focus on defense and security, so it's defense and Department of Homeland Security. But the preponderance of my work is in the Department of Defense. There's no quick way to gain the skills required. As I mentioned, I think if you come off Capitol Hill, that's one way to have learned, but you still need to learn more. If you come out of industry, you may understand your industry role, but you may not fully understand those other roles. I think you need to have spent a little bit of time in each of the three rings of the circus to be highly effective.
Wow. So it's the expertise that is more important than the experience in this case.
I stand by that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, Jin, you have a very unique network also to unique individual with their background, the works that they do also, right? So, can you teach us how have you build relationship and nourish them over the years though?
Most people have some sort of a Rolodex that they have developed over time by working wherever they work. You come to know people. I think LinkedIn has been a tremendous help for people to make new connections. I would not recommend that for cold outreach to people, but if there's a reasonable connection to somebody else or to some interest that you can see in LinkedIn, that can be a way to reach somebody. In the lobbying world, there are opportunities to participate in industry trade shows where I can see what people are trying to bring to market in support of members of Congress. Sometimes that happens through political receptions that take place when Congress conducts hearings. Those are live events where you can listen in to the hearing. You can attend the hearing. Excuse me. You can interact with not only the members of Congress but with attendees at a hearing. There are a lot of ways to reach out and over time become better known. I produce regular content online through a newsletter, through a blog, through social media posts where I try to educate people and tell things about lobbying that they probably don't know or might not know. I don't necessarily treat LinkedIn as somebody might treat Facebook, where you're posting about your vacation. It's very business oriented, and I think if you over time are demonstrating value to other people without expectation of something in return, that tends to produce relationships that will develop over time and that you can rely on.
Beautiful, beautiful. So, Jean, your next book coming in 2023. What month is it gonna be released?
It will probably release in the fall. It's due from me to the publisher by May. I expect to have it to them by March. It's about a third of the way complete right now. I am the loose title of it is Government Deals Are Funded, Not Sold: How to Integrate Lobbying into Your Federal Sales. And I'm combining my research of defense executives with my anecdotal experience of working in this industry to help people recognize some of the things that they could learn by watching the defense industry succeed or in some cases not succeed. It could help anybody do better at engaging government properly and using all of the tools available in their toolkit to sell more effectively to the federal government. So I expect that to be out by the fall sometime.
Wow.
That would be the typical path.
Wow, and I wish you to have all the resource and support that you need so that you can get it on time and get the well accepted by the market also.
Yeah. Well, Taylor and Francis published with for Alan Weiss and me for the $1 Million Influence, and they accepted my proposal for this next book, and so we're under contract, and that will happen.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Yeah.
So, Jean, I have two last questions for our conversation today.
Sure.
Okay. The first question is about thinking. You appear to me a very, very big and deep thinker yourself, and my wife and I, over the past years, we've been trying to help people to improve their ability to think, because we believe that if we can think well, then the whole change process will lead into very positive. But we also believe that our ability to think these days is diminishing. So if we can help people to listen to expert sharings about their way of thinking, and so that they can reflect, they can apply something to learn and use, then that would definitely help them to make that improvement, right? So over the years, how have you been helping yourself to improve your ability to think?
It's a great question. I definitely speak less than many people do, and I speak more slowly than most people do. And in doing so, I try to be deliberate with my words. When I was on active duty, I used to tell people around me that words mean things. And so you had to be precise in your language. And in the military, there is a precision to each word and term has a specific meaning. But I think that in order to be thoughtful, you need to be informing yourself through a variety of means. I was not a great reader as a young adult. I've eased into reading, and now I read and consume books at a pretty high rate. That hasn't always been the case. I was just looking at my number because I talked to some other colleagues about this, and we're in mid-December. I've read over 30 books this year. This is in addition to my academic reading that was required of the PhD. So these are business books that I've read. Now, I've been told that the most successful executives acknowledge reading at least part of as many as 60 books per year. Obviously, that's over a book a week. The average American does not read one book in a year.
Yeah.
So it's a skill that has to be developed. I don't say that it automatically translates to being more thoughtful, but you can't help but learn from others if you consciously try to take in more information. I was not a big podcast person until a couple of years ago. I knew they were out there, but I didn't really know how to find what might appeal to me. And I've only in the last few years become more attuned to what podcasts can offer as a delivery vehicle of new information. And as I take these things in, a podcast or a book, I'm not trying to consume the entire thing and get every message. I think that's unreasonable. But if you can get just a few things out of each book, you're better for it, and you'll apply it in some way. Might be subconscious application, but it will become part of your growing expertise.
Wonderful. Thanks for sharing. So you speak more slowly so that you can use words and better in communication. So you read more and you listen more to podcasts, so that it will help you to absorb the ideas and the thought from other people, to help you to improve your ability to think. So that is what we noted in here, right?
So some people have a very high-speed chip in their brain that allows them to speak and process quickly. I acknowledge that I don't have that, but I make up for it with persistence and hard work, and we'll keep trying and keep at it. But that not having the fast chip, and that's just my term, it also means that I don't leave people behind in a group if I'm communicating. People can usually stay with me, and I find that very, very bright people tend to sometimes speak very quickly and become impatient with those who can't see the world as quickly as they can. That's just not me.
Thanks. And sometimes I face that issue also, James, when people speak too fast, and with a person speaking English as second language, it's really hard for us to absorb the information, to understand in the deeper level. So the last question for you today is about the future. Okay, so we've been traveled the past already. We understand you have the desire, the love to spend time and serve, right? Because following your father, your uncle, and you spent a phenomenal career in the army, went out and work for the public company, then work on your own company.
So that was the Navy. That was the Navy, just to be clear.
Navy, yes. And now you author several books, about to have a new book. Is there anything exciting that Gene is working on and he wants to share with us so that we can celebrate with him now?
Exciting? I'm not sure. I have become very interested in, as a result of my academic studies, I've become much more interested in our access to Congress and helping more people get access to Congress. I refer to the term the democratization of access to Congress, I think, is necessary in our country. Too few people understand how to use it. We have something called the Small Business Administration that helps companies connect with our executive branch across any agency. There's nothing like that in our legislative branch. And I have come to recognize that there could be, and I hope to be some sort of a catalyst for that sort of activity, drawing on my experience, my academic research, and my ability to communicate with Congress. I hope to be a leader in demonstrating that Congress has a role in figuring out how to allow others to see them as a more accessible branch of Congress. It's within their purview to make that happen. I think it has to be laid in front of them. And so I hope, let's say over the coming decade, that I'm able to make some headway on that by bringing others along to that position.
Wow. Eugene, then I wish that you will have all the resource and support that you need to make that happen soon. All right. So and so you're not gonna go on a path alone. There will be people going with you to make the journey a lot more meaningful and joyful. And please, I want to say thank you. Thank you for being so kind to spend your time to join our podcast and share your stories with our audience. And I hope to see you in person one day.
Well, me as well. Thank you, Han. I appreciate the time, and it's a great interview. Enjoyed it. Thank you.
Yeah, you have a wonderful evening. Say hello to your family first and happy holiday season in advance.
And to yours. Thank you.
Bye bye.